hello to everybody else out there. So very briefly, I'm not going to waste your time explaining lots about me. You can go and Google or look on my website, etc. I'm Claire. I teach Pilates. I have a horse. Came to riding quite late in my life, and I really, really appreciated the help that Pilates gave me for staying stable and balanced in the saddle and just being able to take a bit of control over my riding. So I've been teaching Pilates for many years, teach riders in different ways, probably over the last 10 or 15 years, Pilates for about 25 years, specialist in lower back pain as well. And I love to train with lots of different types of mentors. So I do all sorts of training, falconry and different types of Pilates. So I really like to draw from lots of different sources. So let's go on to our first slide. Now, this is an interesting slide talking about different sources. I love to listen to webinars from people who are really science-based. And this is, it is our duty to strive for symmetry. This is actually a quote from Russell McKechnie-Guire. And he, along with people like Andrew and McLean, are really amazing in that they're contributing to the world of horsemanship with evidence-based, science-based information. And so rather than just going on the old ways, we've got new information. And with that new information, we need to be thinking about things in a new way and not necessarily just doing the same old exercises, same kind of fitness. So it really is our duty to try and be symmetrical. And that is for the horse, because there's a whole discourse around social license, you know, riding the horses, what are we expecting from them? So at the very least, we can spend some time thinking about our own body and our own symmetry. Now, as riders, we're very lucky because our sport, at least, is quite symmetrical. So if you think about something like tennis or golf, they're always hitting or using the same arm or hitting the same arm. Whereas in riding, we need to be quite symmetrical and quite balanced. So life is like that as well. Life and riding, we want to be as symmetrical as possible, because when we're not symmetrical, certain structures, or maybe one side of the body, is going to be working harder than the other. This can then start to create tension or overworking, and that can lead sometimes to injury. So even in normal life, even if you're not a rider, we want to try and strive for symmetry, just because that gives us longevity in our body. But as a rider, it's even more important because we have to take into account the horse. We're riding a horse, and the horse, whether it chooses to or not, is carrying our weight. And therefore, to try and minimize the discomfort or problems that we can put through our body and into the horse, we want to try and be as symmetrical as possible. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. This slide shows you a series of photos of Pilates and a series of photos of horse riding, different disciplines. And if I was to talk through some of the principles of Pilates, the words that are here, any one of those words could be applied to Pilates and the exercises that I'm demonstrating there, and also to horse riding. So you can read through them. Release, we need to release tension. Control, we need control. We need to be working with our breathing so we don't hold the breath. We need to be stable, relaxed, strength, focus, breathing, core, all of those things. Any one of those words you could apply to Pilates, and you could also apply to riding. There are moments where we need to be strong and controlled, balanced, symmetrical, focused. We need to be relaxed and strong at the same time. But the two things that are really important, the two words that are principles of Pilates, but I also think are really relevant to riding, is neutral. So I put them in blue. Neutral refers to what we in Pilates would call neutral. It is basically just a fancy word for saying alignment or posture. So when we're riding or standing or walking, we might think of it upright as being our alignment or as our posture. But when we're doing exercises, we take that neutral alignment, we might put ourselves on our side or laying on our spine or face down or sitting, and we want to try and replicate that alignment that we call posture into those exercises. So learning to stay or achieve neutral and then stay in neutral is really relevant in many of the Pilates exercises, and it's also relevant in riding. So if you have an idea of what alignment, your baseline neutral position is, then you can understand if you are veering away from that neutral alignment in one or more ways. If you don't have an idea of centralness alignment, then you're not necessarily going to be able to understand when you're not symmetrical. So the next word that's really important is awareness. Unlike other exercise forms, like say traditional fitness, kind of jumping around aerobic-y type stuff, or maybe working in a gym, with Pilates, there's a real focus on awareness, slowing things down and paying attention to what's happening when you're doing the exercises and how your body copes and how it reacts and where it struggles. So where is your struggle when you're in the Pilates sort of zone? Then you can think about what is difficult in your body and where you need to sort of focus your attention if you're doing exercises. And that awareness, of course, is key when you then take your body alignment, the movements or awareness that you develop in Pilates, you can then take it into not only your riding, but your everyday life. Awareness is key. If we want to be thinking about how symmetrical we are, then we have to have awareness. So Pilates is really helpful for that. It's much more three-dimensional. We move the body in lots of different ways, rather than, again, if you think about gym-based movements, they tend to be sort of push-pulling all in one range. So we need to have awareness to be able to control it in a three-dimensional way. And then that will allow us to transfer it into the various different challenges of riding. Let's have the next slide. So in Pilates, this is a slide really showing how you would take the Pilates from mat or in a studio or in a class to riding. Here you can see a picture of a class of people working on the mat, and we're here learning how to develop that neutral position. So neutral, sitting on the horse, standing if you were moving around, or neutral, laying down on the floor. Now, when you're laying on the floor supports you, and it gives you the space and time to be able to figure out what neutral means and what it feels like and how it feels. Once you understand neutral and you develop awareness and body control, still things that you would need with riding, you can then use different scenarios of Pilates to make that neutral position or control a little bit more challenging. So for example, you can take the exercises onto all fours. When you're on all fours, you're less stable. Your back's not supported on the floor. There's nothing straight holding your back. You could transfer it into standing. There you can see me using a pole to try and help show the neutral alignment of the spine. So not rounding the back, but being in neutral. Not rigid with your back, because nobody's back is flat, but neutral alignment. And so we will use lots of different scenarios to try and understand and help us understand in our own body what neutral feels like and how our body copes or where it struggles. So what is your body happy with and where is it maybe not so comfortable? And we work that out going from the mat and gradually taking ourselves into more challenging either progressions of an exercise or challenging positions. For example, sitting on a Pilates ball, which you can see there in that bottom photo. So if you can stay in neutral laying on the mat, can you then take that neutral alignment and put yourself on a wobbly, unstable surface and still maintain control? And of course, working on a ball is really great. Pilates for riders develops usually working at some point on a ball to then transfer closer to the riding position. So of course you don't ride laying down on a mat, but you can learn things on the mat where the floor is straight, where there's less pressure, you're not having to worry about the horse or whether your body's controlled or not. You then develop, maybe do some exercises on an unstable base, like a Pilates ball, so that you can transfer that into riding. So there you can see a picture of me on my wonderful horse Roo going around a cross-country course, lots of fun. And I'm trying to maintain a neutral position of my spine in my 2-point seat. So the neutral that I'm familiar with on the mat will be easier for me to sustain in the saddle because I've practiced it off the horse. So neutral is very important, and so is awareness. Let's have the next slide. So when we're thinking about neutral, one way is to take some pictures of yourself, as you will see here, and look at the bony markers, the landmarks in our body. So this is where I'd like you guys to get interactive. Look at the photos there, and I've taken some photos of myself, and you can absolutely do this with your own bodies. Put yourself in something dark, quite tightly fitting, and then against a pale background, take some photos. The front of your body, the side of your body. I've also taken it on a saddle horse, so you can see how that would relate to the riding position. Now, the landmarks in our body are kind of bony or other landmarks that we use as a reference. So using your hands, I'd like you to touch your ears. Those are one sort of landmark. Then touch your shoulders, that's another. And then go further down and touch the sides of your ribs. Go further down and touch the sides of your hips. And then those are the markers on the side of your body. We can also think about the markers in the front and back of the body. So touch the middle of your forehead, the nose, the chin, the breastbone, going down to the belly button, and then the pubic bone. So use your hands and be aware of those markers on your body. So we can look at a kind of marker going down the front of the body, and I'll show you in a moment how that relates to riding. You can sit in a riding position. And you can also look at or be aware of the markers that are along the sides of your body. Now, in equipilates, that's one method that I've trained in. They have a really useful description of thinking about your body or your spine in 3 sections, like 3 boxes or 3 sections. So you've got the head box or head section, which is the cervical spine, the rib cage, which is the middle bit, and that's your thoracic spine, and then the pelvis, which is the lumbar spine. And you can see on the picture of me there that I've put little stars on the bony markers. So if you take a photograph of yourself, like I've demonstrated, and you know, I can look at those photos and see all kinds of problems there that I might want to think, oh gosh, you know, that's not symmetrical, but that's my wonky. We're here to think about what's your wonky, because everybody's different. And we have a kind of shape in our body where our bodies sometimes get molded into positions that are either very familiar or habitual, positions that we spend a lot of time in. You work at a desk, for example, you might have a kind of desk posture. If you play golf, you might have a golf posture where you're sort of twisted. So we want to know what we're working with. And one way to gauge that is to take these photos and have a look. If you look at that picture of me, I'm wearing one of Russell's visualized jackets, so it gives you a nice straight line up and across. But look at the stars on my shoulders, look at them on my hips and on my waist, and you can see that they're not quite symmetrical. If you look at the stars on my heels, those are another set of bony landmarks, you'll see that one's slightly higher or forwards. That's my wonky. So you can look at an outline of your body and just look at those bony landmarks. So again, hands on, everybody. Touch your ears. Bring your right ear towards your right shoulder. And then using your hands, can you feel that the space between your right ear and shoulder is shorter than the space on the left side, which has now become longer because you've moved your head? If we did the same with the torso, if I just go a little bit further back, you can see, if I take my shoulder towards the same hip, that side of my body is shorter and the other side is longer. So think about those bony landmarks: ears, shoulders, waist, ribcage, hips, could be the knees and the ankles, and think about how they relate to each other to think about your posture. And it's one way of looking at it. Now, you also have to be aware, if you're a rider, that this is just you. And when you're on the horse, you've also got to take in the horse's bony landmarks and the horse's alignment. And that can be another picture. So that's another consideration. But here we're talking about you and your body and what we can do to build awareness or change what's going on in our body. So you can take pictures, you can think about those 3 boxes. Ideally, they should be stacked. And ideally, all of those bony landmarks should be symmetrical, front to back, side to side. So the space between your shoulder and your hip should be the same on the right and the left. Yeah, great. Who has got that? So symmetry, pure symmetry, is a complete utopia. Nobody is purely symmetrical. You know, your heart beats on one side of the body, so already there's something there that's pulling you one way. And then we have everyday life, we have habits, we have holding a bag on one arm, we have a favorite front leg. All these different things are going to contribute to your posture. So it's just one picture in a big puzzle, but it's really useful to take it in. Look at yourself in a mirror, take a picture and just see that. And also maybe do it on your horse. Now you just, while we're still on this slide, you might notice that little yellow circle around what I put around my buttocks, around my bottom there. So the reason that I've highlighted that is not because I want you all to look at my bottom, but it's because that's the pelvis. Now the pelvis is a very important part of our body, riders and non-riders, because the poor pelvis is right in the middle of our body. It supports everything that's above it, so the upper body, rib cage, internal organs, head, and the head's quite heavy, and anything that you lift up with your arms, but it also shock absorbs everything from underneath. So every step you take needs to be shock absorbed up through the pelvis. So the pelvis is a really important structure in everybody's body, but it's really important for riders because that is your point of contact through the saddle. And if you have asymmetries or stiffness in the pelvis, that can definitely affect what your horse is hearing from you or what your horse is understanding. Or to put that in a better way, what messages you are sending to your horse through your pelvis, so through your seat contact. So that's something that I'd like us to think about now. Let's just go on to the next slide because I don't want you all looking at my bum for the next movement. So just to bring that bony landmarks into context, you'll see on one side that I'm rounding my body. So another landmark is the rib cage to the pelvis, this area between the rib cage and the pelvis. Now, that space is often in many of us closed. If it's closed, your body rounds. If that space is too open, your body arches. So rib cage to pelvis, this is a big one. Now, many of us spend a lot of time sitting. Now, you might not work at a desk, but many people do. If you don't work at a desk, you spend a lot of time sitting for other reasons. But if you're a rider, then of course you're going to spend a lot of time sitting. And when we sit, there's often a temptation for the rib cage to drop down. And that's where you'll see me hunching or rounding forwards. And then look at that scenario on the horse. So that's something we're going to talk about. If it goes the other way, and you can see the other one where I'm lifting my chest to the sky, that's a lovely stretch, but it's not neutral. And if I'm arching my back, and this is something that often happens when, particularly in dressage, for example, when we're trying to sit up very tall, actually we go so far that we over sit up, the back arches, and then you can see on the picture there on my horse how my back is too arched. The picture in the middle, I tried to take it on the horse, but his head got in the way, is where you can see one side of my body is shorter and the other side is longer. And that's very common, asymmetries side to side. So just bearing all of that in mind, I'd like us now to go through a little exercise thinking about your pelvis and how it feels and how it might affect your horse. So I'm going to take myself back onto a stable stool because I don't want to do that on an unstable surface. So hopefully you get a better view of me now. Now, when I'm sitting, or when you guys are sitting, I'd like you to slide your hands under your bottom and rock your pelvis side to side until you can feel your seat bones. That is another bony landmark. Seat bone, the base of your pelvis. So ideally, we want the space between the shoulder and the seat bone to be the same side to side. If you rock side to side, you can feel your seat bones. We should have level seat bones, level on the chair, level in the saddle. They should be level, but they might not be. If I ask you to close your eyes, and you can go away and do that in your own time, close your eyes, rock side to side and just sort of wait. and notice. It sometimes takes a while, but you might notice one side is lower or heavier or different from the other. We're going to do a few movements with the pelvis for you to try and feel where your pelvis sits. So if you imagine your pelvis like the sole of a shoe, the toe at the front and the heel at the back. Rock your pelvis so all of the weight is on the front or on the toe. Rock your pelvis so all the weight is on the back or on the heel. As you rock forwards and backwards, you can feel movement in the rest of the spine. So once again, the pelvis is super important because where the pelvis is going to affect everything above it and also below it. So you can see, and I hope you can feel, that when I rock my pelvis onto the back of my shoe, if you like, onto the heel, my spine is rounded and the bony landmark rib to pelvis has become too closed. My spine is rounded. And this is sometimes a familiar posture when we're sitting, slumped, driving, tired, rainy day posture. We're just not thinking, and that's where we slump. If you shift your weight towards the front of the pelvis, then you get a less obvious, but still out of neutral arch in the lower back. And so we want to be in the middle, where your pelvic position is sitting fair and square in the middle. If you find those seat bones again, and think about your seat bones as arrows, if your arrows are pointed too far forwards, and if you were sitting on the horse towards the horse's ears, you're probably going to have your posture too rounded. If your seat bones are pointing towards the back of you or towards your horse's tail, you're probably going to be too arched. We want the seat bones, like arrows, to be pointing directly down. So that's something that you might have to play with different positions in order to be able to come to rest to that midway position. Now, another thing that can happen, so that's talking about the too round, too arched, and you can usually see that posture side on. Another one is the too low to one side or too long on the other. With one seat bone, just lift it up slightly and imagine that you want to polish the seat with your seat bone. As you polish, one side goes forwards and the other one is further back. Do that on the other side, lift the seat bone slightly and polish the chair with the other one. Some of us get stuck with the seat bone in that I'm polishing forwards position and the spine is rounded, or too far back and the spine twists or collapses or lengthens on one side. So these are all good movements, but we want to try and feel a midway position where everything is level and balanced. Both sides are level. The space breastbone to pubic bone, so rib cage to pelvis, is correctly open, not closed, not too open, but correctly. And we want those seat bones to be pointing down. So you've got that idea of symmetry. Now, there's no point in starting to build strength to do exercises that create tone and strength unless we're trying to bring ourselves into a more symmetrical alignment first. So if you're very wonky and you strengthen all your muscles around very wonky, that's how you're going to stay. So before you do any strengthening exercises, try and bring yourself into that neutral alignment and just try and be as symmetrical as your body can be. How are you going to know? We'll go to a Pilates class. Because during Pilates, you're going to explore different movements from different perspectives, up, down, side, forwards, backwards, pelvis, rib cage, shoulder, leg, and all of that experience together gives you better awareness and helps you understand where you might struggle and where maybe you might need to focus your attention. Another thing that I'd like us to work on is what I call elevate. So as I said, rainy day posture is where we just collapse down. We're just giving into gravity. Gravity is our enemy. But if we lengthen up through the spine, imagine you've got a bowl of soup on the crown of your head and you're trying to push the bowl of soup up through the body and keep your seat bones, arrows pointing down, grounded into the chair. That then lifts the body weight up against the pull of gravity. And now you are more stable, less at the kind of mercy of gravity. You're more stable and you're going to be lighter in the saddle. So I call this elevate. When you're sinking and heavy, think, I'm going to pull that bowl of soup up towards the sky or the ceiling, and I'm going to elevate up through my spine. And as you're pushing against gravity upwards, you should instantly feel that you've got more tone in your torso. Now, if I've got that tone in my torso, I still need my seat bones to be level. Take your feet wider and slightly tucked underneath you, and go into a little hip hinge or a squat, and come up to a little hover. Reach your bum away and down to the point where you're just feeling your seat bones on the floor, on the chair, sorry, and then give in to gravity. The last bit was falling. Now come back up, elevate again, and this time bring your seat bones to the chair where they're tickling but not resting. Then bring your body upright and feel that you've got weight through the body pulling upwards, but your seat bones are connected into the chair or the saddle. And this is us resisting gravity. So you could ride and you could practice this sitting trot, up, down, resisting gravity, pushing up against gravity. So I'm in neutral here, I'm in neutral there, I'm reaching up through the spine, and I'm taking myself into my trot, up and down. Or I could lift, fall, lift, fall, lift, fall. Lifting up, I use muscles. Sitting down, I'm just falling. And that's something that we might do when we're riding, because after all, it's easier to fall. But wouldn't the horse be happier if we resisted and took responsibility for our own body weight? Now, you can't do that upright unless you can take your legs really wide. You might be able to do it like that. You're only hinged forwards here because you don't have your feet in the saddle. But it's a way of explaining that we can resist gravity and try not to let the body weight slump down and become very heavy into the saddle or into the pelvis. So just a little recap: seat bones facing down, body alignment correct or as close to neutral as you can get, and always think about the pelvis. It's a shock absorber, very important. If your pelvis is wonky, it's going to pull everything else with it, and that's going to make it harder for the horse to support your body weight. Okay, let's come in now to the next slide. Lovely. So talking about awareness, this is the picture of somebody who I'm doing biomechanical testing on. So biomechanical testing basically looks at those bony landmarks and just tests where there's tightness, where the movement is either restricted or comfortable. And in this lady who's a competition rider, she also does a lot of running. She's very tight in the front of her hips. So we measured that tightness, and you can see that on the first picture, her leg is pretty much on the horizon. That means the muscles on the front of her hip crease, that's where your body meets your thigh, those muscles are quite tight. It's very common for someone like her. She's a journalist, so spends a lot of time sitting and runs, that you've got that tightness. But interestingly, on the left leg, the other leg, can you see how the thigh drops down? That side is not so tight. And so this is where we start to then maybe have an issue, because if you're tight on both sides, at least you're symmetrical. But if you're very loose on one side and you're tight on the other, that's when you're going to get pulled one way. So just do a little exercise with me. Put your hands together and press your hands into each other. Straight away, elevate. You can push your bowl of soup up, keep your seat bones pointing down. So you're in your best neutral version. Straight away as you press, you should feel your core muscles tightening. So you can feel them really working. Now just take both your hands slightly to one side, doesn't matter which, and press over there. Can you feel now as you're pressing that one side, arm, maybe even body, if you did Pilates, you'd have awareness and you'd probably notice that. As you're over to one side of your body's working harder than the other. That would be okay if you then did the movement over on the other side. But sometimes in life, because of our habits, because of the way our bodies are built, it's like we're always pressing and working on one side. So if my body was always working, keep your hands over on one side, press them together, they were always working harder on that one side, then that one side would get stronger and the other side would actually, as a result, get weaker. And that one side would start to take over and the weaker side might not be able to catch up. And that's how we start to feel asymmetries in the body. So we're going to do another little exercise. I think you don't need to screen share with this one. I think we can just do it with me a little bit further back. We're going to take an upward stretch with the arms. And with your arms reaching up, reach one arm higher and then reach the other arm higher. And as you change from one to the other, notice how the sides of your body react. As I reach up with the right arm, the right side gets longer. And then, of course, as I reach with the left side gets longer. So this is a wonderful upward stretch. It's very nice to reach and lengthen up. But this wonderful upward stretch is also helping to lengthen out where we might be tight or blocked on one side. So if you're a person that's collapsed onto one side, upward stretch. Release, it helps you lengthen up through the body. It mobilizes the spine. And sometimes when we get stuck in our own posture, in our own wonky, we just need to move. We just need to get up, stand up and do it standing and just get moving. But this is great for releasing the sides of the body. Now we're going to wrap the arms across. Really grab hold of the back of your shoulders so that your elbows are bent in front of you. Keep your seat bones pointing down and point your elbows and with it your face to one side. Come back to center and then go to the other. Can you feel, maybe closing your eyes will help, that maybe one way is a bit stiffer or tighter than the other? Now think about bony landmarks. Can you, as you're doing this movement, get the middle of the forehead, the nose, the breastbone, and the points of your elbows all in the same line? Or are you pulling the elbows, leaving the head behind, or turning the head and the elbows aren't quite catching up? So take it all as one and get better control. Notice if one side feels stiffer. Often it does. Now here's a funky thing. Cross your arms the other way. And you might feel that that's not so comfortable because we usually have one side that's more comfortable and one side that we like to work with. So if you cross your arms one way and then you try and do it the other, it feels a bit weird. It feels like you're uncoordinated. And that's sometimes why we need to try and do things differently so we don't get stuck. Have you ever tried to get on your horse from the other side? That's something that absolutely freaked me out. I put my foot in the stirrup, using the wrong leg to go over, or right foot, and my leg just simply didn't want to go because there wasn't the neurological connection to it. So doing lots of different movements is essential to just keeping your body and your mind available to something that's new, improvements, changes, differences. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Now, I love this slide because I was teaching a class of people and we had like a sort of workshop. We had some awareness, then we had a class, and then we had a ridden session with their riding instructor. And while we were teaching the class, this lovely horse Pie was looking over and really interested. And I just thought, you know, wouldn't it be great if everybody was able to do some Pilates, because the horse would be really pleased about that. This is going to be really great for me. I can see that they're making an effort. I can see that they're going to do something that's going to help when they then come and ride me. So I just thought it was really nice way of representing that it is important for the horse, and the horse is going to be benefiting from your awareness. We spend a lot of time obviously thinking about, well, many people do, about symmetry in the horse and physio and everything. Pay that attention to your own body because you have a big effect on the horse for good or otherwise. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So here I just like to talk about the two different areas that we really focus on in Pilates. And you've got the lovely role model there sitting on my saddle horse. So in Pilates, we obviously we do lots of different movements, but there's two areas of focus. Around the pelvis, which as I've described is super important for everybody, but especially riders. And we do movements and strengthening for the lower body, usually involving the legs. And then around the upper body, which involves the shoulders and the rib cage. And we do lots of movements with the arms. So lower and upper body and combinations of both of those. And you can see some of the exercises. So where I've got my legs lifted on all fours, or that's working the pelvis. And where I've got my arms out, that's working the upper body. So we're going to do a couple of exercises. Again, you don't need to screen share, you can see me from there. That are going to work on those two areas of the body. Clasp your hands so your hands are together and keep your arms straight and push your hands away until you feel your shoulder blades opening. And then keep your arms absolutely locked straight and pull your hands back towards you until you feel your shoulder blades closing. Push away, pull back in. Now, as you're doing that, you can either let that movement pull your body and rock away, or you can elevate, bowl of soup up, seat bones and arrows down, and you can decide that you're going to keep your body still while you move your arms. Now, this can be really great for riders because working with the upper body and the arms relates to us holding the reins. And I'm sure all of us at some point might have been pulled forwards with the rein. So here you're practicing, I should be able to move my arms, but keep my body still. Even if it was a jerky movement, I'm going to resist because I'm thinking about pulling up and not being pulled forwards. The other important thing, keep with that, but look at my hands. When you're pushing, your shoulder blades, the big flat bones on your body, splay open. And when your hands are coming in, your shoulder blades close. So as you do this exercise, if your shoulder blades were my hands, they're going out and in. Now your shoulder blades should glide and slide on your rib cage. And if they don't, then it can inhibit your ability to control, move, or stabilize your upper back. So this exercise is amazing for loosening those scapula and giving us control of where the arm needs to be. Bent, straight, in, out, whatever, has to be supported from your shoulder blades. So shoulder blades. And the shoulder blades are really overlooked. They are what I call the donkey joints and muscles that support literally every movement that you do with your arm, and every weight that you pick up, or every force, whether it's the reins pulling or whatever, has to be supported by your shoulder blades. It's super important that you're aware of that. Now, we also work with pelvic movement and control. So a little exercise that you can try here. Keep your legs bent, hip distance apart. Can you lift one of your thighs and knees up and put it back down? And then can you lift on the other side? As you lift and lower your leg, notice whether you can keep your body still. So when you lift the leg, do you collapse? Or when you move your leg, does your pelvis wiggle? Is it easier for you to lift one leg compared to the other? You're starting to understand what's going on in your body, and the more diverse of influences or exercises that you can do, the more information you'll gather on how your body copes. So single leg lift from seated, you should be able to lift the leg up without your body being disturbed. That's pelvis or rib cage. Another movement, you might not be able to do this if you're on a chair, but I'm on a stool. I've got my legs hip distance apart. I'm just going to take one leg back. So that leg back is stretching across the front of the hip. This is an amazing stretch for those of us who ride, and often we need to be able to move the leg back. And if we're tight in these hip muscles, like I showed you with that lady who I did the test, if you're tight in this muscle, when you try and take your leg back, and we often need to do that in the saddle, it's going to arch your back. Now your seat bones are pointed towards your horse's tail, and you're going to be jabbing him in the back every time you sit. So if we want to stretch, draw the bottom of your pelvis or your pubic bone towards your rib cage. Draw the pelvis towards the rib cage, and that's going to give you a beautiful deep stretch here. And it's going to stop when you take your leg in this position or backwards, your back from arching. So let's try that on the other leg. Start with your legs parallel and take the other leg backwards. It's just bent. It's called a 90-90. So both of your legs are in a 90-degree alignment. And when the leg goes back, draw the pubic bone towards the rib cage. Bony landmarks. Pubic bone comes towards the rib cage. Now, if you did Pilates, you'd know that that was called a pelvic tilt. And that's going to stretch the hip and prevent you from arching your back. So it's a win-win. I get a great stretch. I can control the leg going back, and my spine's not arching. So I'm in neutral, and it will be kind of the horse. Seat bones pointing down. Great stretch. Okay, let's move on to our next slide. Now, this is interesting. So one thing that you've also got to do, again, I talked about trying to find symmetry. Before you start building loads of strength, you need to be as symmetrical as you can, is to release muscles that are tight. This is a really interesting picture. I was doing a winter series and we spent about an hour just releasing the front of the chest. So if you're in rounded posture, like somebody who works on a computer, I don't really know why I'm doing that with my fingers, but posture forwards, the shoulders get tight, the chest gets tight. So no matter how much I say to you, try not to round your spine, sit up tall, these tight muscles, particularly if you're not concentrating, are going to keep pulling you forward because that's the position that your body's been molded to. That's your default. So if we want to be in neutral, we have to release muscles that are tight. Once we've released tight muscles, then we can start to build on tone and strength. We want to build on that symmetrical frame. And sometimes tightness just gets in the way. This is really interesting. So all we did was shoulder release. And I didn't cue this person to sit up or anything. I just said, plop yourself on the saddle horse. And this is a before and after. We released her shoulders. And you can see that she's tight in the front and her lower back arches. So we get this too rounded and too arched both at the same time. And then it pokes the chin forwards. And look at the difference. All we did was release the shoulders and the front of the chest. And it immediately allowed her to sit up. This lady's an endurance rider. So of course her posture in the saddle for hours and hours is really important. And it was just such an amazing difference. So that's as a result of release. Release is very important. Release tightness first, and then you're going to be more likely to maintain the alignment that you're after. Lovely, let's go on. So what can we do? What action can we take? Well, there are a few versions here. One of those pictures, you'll see me with the horse, is me doing a warm-up, a pre-ride warm-up. Warming up, moving my body, particularly if you travel to your yard in a car, you've already come in a fixed posture. You need to break out of that mold and release and just change it up and move so that you're not carrying that blocked posture onto your horse. So a pre-ride warm-up is great. You can do it in the, you can see me there, I'm just doing it on my grooming box. You can do it in the tack room. Sometimes I do little stretches actually in the arena before I get on. And that, again, just draws those sort of awarenesses back into your body. So you're getting rid of any blockages, but you're also changing your mindset. How do I feel? One of the other pictures is me working with a young lady who, it was a specific one-to-one session. We then really figured out quite quickly what were the main things that we might want to work on. And when you work on somebody, you know, one-to-one, you can really hone in on the things that they might need. So that little program of exercises was specifically designed for her, and they were going to be the first things, the first point of call that would help her body. And she started off really rounded, and you can see this beautiful, she was basically riding always like that. She wasn't rounded, but she was tipped forwards. And there were other issues that we worked on. So you just pick a few of the sort of biggest things and work on them. And then once that's worked on, you can move on. So you can definitely do sessions one-to-one with somebody. Getting somebody else to look is really useful because sometimes things in our body, they're so familiar that we don't notice them anymore. Our wonkiness, our one-sidedness, the fact that we always lead with one arm or whatever, we don't notice. And a fresh eye can really draw attention to that. Another thing that you can do, you can see a picture here with me working with some riders, is actually do some exercises on the horse to either change your posture or bring your awareness to your posture. But the really wonderful thing, and I just wish more people would do it, is to go regularly to Pilates. And that's the last picture there. You can see me just adjusting some people in a class. Classes are great because they give you more time to practice and more diversity. So if you do a one-to-one, it's very focused, it's very intense, and it's very that. But where a class, you get lots of different input and you get a chance to practice different movements and perfect them. Sometimes go wrong and think, oh yeah, that's different. And you don't necessarily need to have all that biomechanical testing. If you do lots of classes, you will start to notice, actually, when I slide or move that right leg, it feels harder or different from the left. And then you start to get the awareness. When you get awareness, then you can start to make your warm-up, your exercises more targeted. And you can draw things from your Pilates into your life and into your riding. So classes are great, one-to-one, small sessions, it's all good. It's just all part of a puzzle. But sometimes we need to practice and repeat. And in repeating, we perfect or we get better awareness. So classes are great too. Let's move on. So another thing that we can bear in mind is everyday life. What's your mold? What do you do that has an effect on your body? And here you can see a picture of a young lad who is doing some stable duties. Now he is demonstrating, as he picks up that wheelbarrow, a perfect squat position. You can see the lady using the Dynaband also doing a perfect squat position. So we have learned in a class situation how to do a correct squat with correct neutral spine. We've then added intensity by adding the stretch of the Dynaband to represent lifting a heavy weight. So that is the same demand on the body in the class as what you see the young man lifting the barrow, holding that barrow, holding that weight. So what we do in functional life is also very important, because after all, you spend a lot more time doing functional movement. That just means stuff you do in your life. You spend a lot more time doing things than you do exercising. So if you're lucky enough to do 1 hour a week, well, that's only an hour. But if you can think about your structure, your position, your elevate, your control in the movements that you do in everyday life, that's really powerful, because you can then build strength as you are moving. You can change your symmetry and improve it as you are living your life. So little and often, and bring the things that you learn, your awareness, into action, and have good technique and awareness of good technique. So that can be really, really powerful. Let's move on to the next slide. So another thing that I like to talk about are anytime, anywhere exercises. Now, in an ideal world, we'd all be doing Pilates 2 or 3 times a week at about 30 to 45 minutes. You'd be doing one-to-ones every so often to make sure that you've got it all on track. And you'd be working with an instructor who can give you some kind of body awareness when you're riding. Yeah, of course, utopia once again. The reality is we're busy and we don't have time for all of that. So anytime, anywhere exercises are really working along the theme that every little helps. Every time you think, oh, I've slouched to one side, where's my seat bones? Pointing, and you sit up, is 1 second where you're getting more strength and you're taking pressure off your structures. So every little thing that you do can help to improve your awareness or your control. So here you can see me in various different scenarios actually doing some Pilates exercises. I'm on a walk with my dog. I'm actually sitting at a desk doing a chest exercise. I'm riding my horse, and as I'm riding my horse, I'm thinking lift the rib cage, or open the chest, or connect through the core. I'm on a paddleboard. I'm doing some exercises for my spine. And then the dodgy picture in the middle is actually me lifting my leg up on a fence and doing a hamstring stretch. So short exercises, or maybe stretches or movements that you can do anytime, anywhere, can really have a positive effect, because once again, you can lace it into your everyday life. Or maybe just do it as a kickstart before you ride, or before you go and do something where maybe you know you're going to be sitting for ages. So anytime, anywhere exercises, fabulous to just try and shake it all up a little bit. Okay, so talking about shaking it all up, we've been sitting for quite some time. We're now going to stand up and we're going to move. Push your chair away and come up to stand. Now take your feet to quite close together. Because they're close together, you're going to have a less stable base, and you're already going to have to work a little bit harder to maintain balance. Reach your arms up and reach your right arm and then your left arm. And really reach up and reach from one side to the other into that upward stretch, and you're actually taking your body into a side bend. So bending one way and then the other. Now take both of the arms out to the side, and when they get to about shoulder height, just push them slightly backwards And as you push your arms slightly backwards, you can open the front of the chest and the front of the shoulders, which is an area where many of us are quite tight. So it tends to be here and here. Open the chest and then bring the arms down. Wiggle your body and shimmy it up and down. Loosen. Flop those arms forwards and back and wiggle through the body. Now you're going to take one shoulder up, roll it back and down, and then do the other. This is not only going to release the shoulder, but as you roll your shoulder back, it's starting to take your body into a little twist, a little rotation. And this stretches the muscles diagonally across the body. So big, meaty shoulder roll, up, back, and down, and then on the other side. Now lift your heels and just start to bounce. Bend the knees and just bounce a little bit. And if you feel that you can, if you don't have problems with the spine, so if you've got osteoporosis or problems with the lumbar spine, you might not want to, you could just bounce on the balls of the feet. Just let the heels tickle into the floor. And then you can lift your arms up and bring them back down. And you might only need to do that for a few seconds and you already feel looser and a little bit more relaxed. The next thing we're going to do, can you do it? Take your feet to hip distance, is sway your body to the right, sway your body to the left. And as you sway onto one leg, lift the other foot up. Can you balance on one leg? Start to circle your foot that's hanging. Circle one way, slowly the other. Now, mobility in the ankle and the foot to keep changing direction is very important for riders because of the fixed position in the stirrup. Strengthening the hip that you're standing on and balancing, so working on core and balance. Shake it out and then shift the weight one way and then the other and come to rest with all your weight on the other leg. Can you stand on one leg and lift that new leg up? Circle the ankle. If it's difficult, you could be holding on to a chair or the wall. Circle the ankle the other way. Now, as you lifted that leg, did your body sink or are you lifting up? Bony landmarks, rib cage to hip, ear to shoulder, breastbone to belly button, making sure that your body is stable. So core, balance, hip strength, bum workout, and that lovely mobility in the ankle. And how does it compare? Can you balance on both legs the same, or is one side a little bit more tricky? Very important. Shake it out. Arms. So we talked about how we can be tight in the chest. Bring your arms in front of you with the backs of the hands touching. Swivel your arms so that the front of the hands or the palms faces up and take your arms backwards. Swivel, come in, bend the knees. Swivel, go out, lift the chest, straighten the legs. And in and out. Bend the knees, arms in, straight legs, chest up and up. So this isn't neutral, but it is a way of releasing and moving the body. Take your feet to hip distance, bend the knees, hinging at the hip, squat. Now this is a 2-point seat, very important. You might have your head up if you're going into a jump, but this is a neutral position, it's very functional. Take the arms up and down and back, up and down and back. Work the bum by pushing your bum a little bit further back. 3 more. Keep the neck in line. Now your spine is in neutral, in the same neutral that it would be if you were laying on the mat, but you happen to be in a squat position. Now come up, loosen through the shoulders. Lift one of your knees up. Can you balance on that leg? And then take it behind you. Now, as your leg goes behind you, we want the front of the hip to stretch, not your back to arch. Go again, knee in front, knee behind. Leg comes up, stretch the back. As it goes backwards, stretch the front here. Now, if you're stretching here and it makes your back arch, then you need to do a pelvic tilt. If you were doing Pilates, you'd know what that meant. Knee up as the leg goes back. Pull the tailbone through so that your spine stays still as the leg goes back, rather than your body arching. Shake it out, other leg. Knee up. Obviously, you've got to balance on the other leg, leg back. And when your leg is going back, Bring that pubic bone through so that your back doesn't arch, your tailbone tucks in, those seat bones should still be looking down. If they get pulled back, then your lower back is arching. We need to be able to move the leg independently of the body. And that, of course, is a riding phrase. So to be able to do some of these exercises like this without your back arching, or the squat, Pilates, of course, is going to give us that awareness. Okay, finish there. Big stretch up, open the arms, and wiggle it through. So just a few minutes of movement can make us feel just so much easier through the body. Let's go on to our next slide. So stay there with the, oh, it's okay, stay there, it doesn't matter where we are. So anytime, anywhere. Another exercise that I wanted to work through, anytime, anywhere, we happen to be sitting, squeeze your bum, unsqueeze, squeeze your bum, unsqueeze, squeeze the right side, hup, unsqueeze, and the left side, unsqueeze. If I show you that face on, right, left. So if one side of your bum is tight and the other one is not, it could ruin your posture. Squeeze both together, squeeze and hold, squeeze harder and hold, squeeze one, squeeze the other. So if you happen to be sitting somewhere for a while, I once did this in an airport queue for about an hour. The next day I could barely walk, but use this time to your advantage. I could squeeze my bum and strengthen the glutes. And if those glutes are stronger, then you'll be able to take the leg backwards when you need to. So let's go on to our last slide. Right back to where we started. It is our duty to work towards understanding at least symmetry. And in order to do that, we need awareness. So what's going on in your body? What's your everyday posture? Where is your body always being pulled? What are your habits? What's your default? What do you struggle with? What's easy to control? And then once you've got that awareness, you can not only do exercise and movement, all movement is good, but you can make those movements targeted to what you need. And particularly for us guys that ride really time poor, we don't necessarily have loads of time, but the time we have got, we want to make sure it's targeted. So even if you can't do loads of amazing exercises, do something. Every little helps, and every little thing is going to push you forwards to better alignment, better control, or better awareness. So the takeaway from this is awareness. Know your wonky. You are wonky, and know what is your wonky, and then you can do something about it. And of course, don't forget that we do it for them. And Pilates is one way of developing your awareness so that you can help them.
Thank you, Claire. That was fantastic. And I've been standing back there doing my I love the wiggle actually.
Yeah, the shimmy. It's so great, isn't it? Yeah.
So
and
good.
Also the other thing, when you do these upward stretches and you reach, the word for that is pendiculate. How cool is that? Oh. I mean, it's got a word, you know, like animals when they get up and they stretch, and we just need to sort of stretch the fascia and all of that. So if you can do a little bit of pendiculation, then that can free yourself up as well.
Oh, amazing. So folks, we will chat and ask Claire some questions whilst you guys are typing and asking your questions. So please click on the Q&A, and if you've got any questions at all about how the impact of our bodies on riding, how we can loosen certain bits up, if anyone's got a particular problem, I'm sure that's all right as well for us to ask, isn't it, Claire?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, we've got just as well, while we're chatting, you've done a little warm-up video that's on the website as well, haven't you, on our website?
That's right, yes. So yeah, you can definitely go through and have a little look at that. It's only a few minutes, I think, isn't it? 5 minutes, something like that. Yeah,
and I think you're actually doing it in the stable as well, so that if you're a bit embarrassed about doing your warm-up exercises on the yard, then just hide at the back of the stable behind
exactly. Yeah, hide behind the horse. Nobody needs to know.
Absolutely.
But I mean, how shocking is that? That's actually so shocking, actually, because on the yard that I used to be on, it was a really big competition yard. There was about 70 people there. And I used to do exactly that. Even though everybody knew I was a Pilates instructor, I would still hide and try and make sure nobody. And I mean, it's just crazy. Why should we be ashamed of doing that? We're told off if we don't warm up the horse. And yet, you know, we don't really pay attention to our own body. And you are made to feel a little bit self-conscious. So what are you doing back there? Actually, let's embrace this. This is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I've popped in, you said at the beginning, if you want to find out a little bit more about me, take a look online. Well, I've just popped into the chat earlier a link if you want to copy and paste it or have a look on Apple Podcasts. I've put a link to the podcast episode we did with you, Claire, because you talk a little bit about your journey and a bit more about your horse-roo that we were introducing at the beginning there. So do listen to that if you haven't already. We really enjoyed recording that with you.
Great. So, and just I do Pilates. In fact, I'm going tomorrow, and I can really tell the difference. But just for those people who don't, or maybe think about it, you talk quite a lot about release. So just explain a little bit more about what release actually is and how people can achieve that.
Okay, so when we, if you think about, for example, the front and back of the body, if the front and back of the body are in balance, you know, another rider word, you should be able to hold your body up straight. But if one element is tighter than the other, so let's say my back is tight, it will pull me like this. And that's now going to pull the structures, the joints and the muscles, so that they're clumped up and under more pressure at the back, tighter, and they might get very strong, and too lengthened at the front. So if I want to be more level in my body, I'm going to have to release the muscles that are tight so that they don't keep pulling me there, and then I can achieve that posture more easily. So if I'm very tight here, and there is a play on this, you know, sometimes it's just awareness. So this, for example, is just awareness, often, because gravity pulls us. There's nothing under the rib cage holding it up apart from muscle. So if we don't consciously sit up, we'll just fall down. So that's awareness. But if you've got muscles here that are physically tight, they are pulling in, and actually you can do things to release these muscles. So if a muscle is very tight, you can release it. It doesn't necessarily have to be longer, but not so tight and scrunched up. If you release it, then it allows the shoulder to go into an optimal alignment. And that is what we're talking about with release, is being able to get rid of muscles that might be tight or interfering or pulling us to one side. So a really cool thing to do would be, if you're able to do it at some point, get all of your clothing and pull it over to one side and shove it into your trousers. So everything's pulled over to my right. And now as I'm walking, I can still walk. I can still walk. I can still do what I need to do, but everything's being pulled over there. So I'm going to veer off in that direction. You know, if I was trying to walk in a straight line with my eyes closed, I'm going to be pulled there because my muscles are pulled over there. So if I don't want to be pulled over or biased to that side, I've got to release that tightness and bring everything back to where it should be so that my body can work in balance.
Brilliant. I love that explanation.
Yeah. Try pulling your clothes over to one side. It's interesting.
It's not in a public place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just, we've got a couple of questions just to build on that one before we move on to those. How, if you are quite tight in whichever place, how long is it going to take to release that? Is it, you're going to need to work on that consistently? Is it something that you can do in a session? How long does it take?
Well, do you remember the picture of the endurance rider on the saddle horse? That was in one session over just about an hour, and we only worked on the top of her body at the front. We didn't really do much about the legs. You know, there were a few stretches and things, but it was all here. So that was a remarkable difference in just 1 hour, which would immediately take the pressure off her back because she was quite arched in her lower back. So that's sometimes quite uncomfortable. We tend to cope with this more and not so much that. So that's instantly uncomfortable, whereas this is long-term going to do damage because over years and years, it's not great for the spine. But it's not uncomfortable to be here, is it? Because it's such a familiar position. So you can get a really good result from maybe half an hour of release In fact, you know, a lot of things I do again with awareness, we'll do an arm movement, then we'll do a few exercises, maybe only 10 minutes, and then we retest. And people say, wow, you know, that's amazing. But then if you keep going back to doing the same thing that you do, you're going to go back there. Yeah. So sometimes in Pilates, we're basically undoing the fixed or mold that you have to have. I mean, you work at a desk, or, you know, you do hard labor, or, you know, you are, I don't know, a dental hygienist that's always twisting. That's your reality. You have to live with it, but you can do things to counteract it. So sometimes we're counteracting, we're just catching up. And sometimes if you can, and you've got the time, and as riders, I know we're time poor, but we're also very results driven. A lot of people will come to me because they're saying, I've got this issue, it's holding me back, I need to do something about it. And when you need to, pain is another good motivator. You know, if you're in pain, people suddenly want to do things. When you need to do it and you keep up with it, then you can start to get those incremental improvements. So you can see results instantly, but holding on to those results depends on how you live and how motivated you are. You know, so small movements every day, amazing. And as I said, the two areas for both riders, but also for a lot of generally, are chest and shoulders here. So just go open, instantly I've made an improvement. And the other thing are hips here. So you do that 90-90 exercise. That would be a cool thing. So anybody watching now or later, do what I call the 90-90 exercise. So you put one leg 90 at the front, one leg 90 at the back, don't let your back arch, and just stay there for about, I don't know, 30 seconds, a minute. Get up and walk around and notice what the side that you stretched feels like compared to the other side. It is really interesting. And then please go and do the other side.
All right, we've now got quite a lot of questions, so we're going to go through them quickly, if that's all right, Claire.
Yeah.
So, first one from Emma. Hi there, I coach riding. Was going to ask what the best exercises you would suggest I could incorporate into my lessons to help the rider warm up and get awareness of their posture. That's the first.
Okay. Yeah. So very easy would be, if the horses obviously are, you know, safe to do it, you do have to bear that in mind, because, you know, sometimes that's not possible. Or maybe, you know, hold the reins of the horse of the riders riding it. So lift one of your arms up. When it's next to the ear, rotate your body and bring the arm down towards the horse's bum and back round. And so that you're not losing stability, do 3 or 4 on one side, because if you constantly change sides, then you have to change the reins, and that's not so safe. Okay, so hold on to the reins or the horse and one arm. Now the other arm, if you've got a chance to, you could actually put that on the inside, the same side as your arm is in the air of the horse, and you can take yourself into a bit more of a stretch. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I'm sitting looking at the horse. I'm going to take my right arm up and rotate, and I'm going to put my left hand on the right side of the pommel towards that side of the neck, and then I get a good stretch. And of course, then I do that on the other side. So opposite side. If you can't do the big arm, the big roll of the shoulder, one on one side, one on the other. Also practice the pelvic tilt, drawing the pubic bone. And if you don't like to use the word pubic bone, just say the bottom of the pelvis. Pull it towards your rib cage. So that takes my lower back into a curve without my upper back collapsing. So what we don't want is dropping the shoulders down, but we can bring the pubic bone through, and that will facilitate moving the leg back. So that's another good exercise. Drop the leg out of the stirrup and let it dangle. So it's literally just going like that. And then say, can you stop your body moving and hold your body still? Let the leg dangle, and obviously do it on both sides. Pelvic tilt, where you bring the pubic bone up, is actually a really useful movement, because that's what you would do if you're going into sitting trot or going into canter. So it's one of the movements that we do need to be able to learn without clenching your bum. And another good thing, squeeze the bum, let go, because you shouldn't be clenching your bum when you ride. So if you can feel the squeeze, you can feel the let go.
Great. And Emma had one other part to her question. She's trying to find a class for her 13-year-old daughter who's also a rider. Any ideas, because there don't seem to be any for teenagers?
Yeah, interesting. I do know a few people who do classes for teenagers, but it depends on where she is. There's lots of things that are online, you know, fit for kids and things like that. So it's just one of those things you've got to search. It's also very tricky because there are lots of different types of Pilates instructors, and some are more sort of fitness based and some are more, you know, mindful based. So you've really got to just like get out there and look. And I know some of the gyms, you know, community gyms, they do a lot of good work for kids, but it's very fitness based. And if you're a rider, then you probably do need to go to a, you know, a specific sort of Pilates class rather than a gym one.
Right, thank you. We've got one from Cinda. Hello, Claire. Thank you. That was so helpful, especially the explanations. I get confused with the pelvic floor and the difference from Pilates and when you're on the horse in relation to stabilizing.
Okay.
For example, I think some thoughts are bearing down, not pulling up the pelvic floor.
Yeah. So as a general rule, we don't talk too much about the pelvic floor when we're riding, because if you're tight in that area, then that's going to restrict the movement of your pelvis and the shock absorbency. So when you're riding the horse, that movement should be absorbed up through first the hips, then into the pelvis, and then up through the spine. So that idea of, you know, the dressage head knobbling or bobbling about, we don't want that, because we want all of that shock absorbency to go up. And if your pelvic floor is too tight or, you know, too gripped, then it's going to block that. So yes, in old Pilates, that's, you know, that's old, like, you know, old technology. We don't do that anymore. All the zip up and pull, gone. I mean, it was pretty much gone when I learned to, you know, started teaching like 25 years ago. So now we don't pull up the pelvic floor. If you've got to do Kegels for whatever reason, you might want to pull up the floor and pelvic floor and release. That's a different thing, because you're working on your pelvic floor. But as riders, you want to be working on thinking about stability, and the muscles of the pelvis, not just the pelvic floor, but other muscles should just be helping you. Imagery is really important. So instead of thinking squeeze the pelvic muscles, think my pelvis is set in concrete and I don't want it to move. Use imagery. Squeezing the pelvic floor is not something that we do a lot of anyway. So an example of a really good pelvic floor, dynamic pelvic floor exercise, wait for it, is in stretch. In stretch. That is me contracting and stretching the pelvic floor so that it is elastic. So when I get on the horse and move or need to canter or sit forwards, the pelvic floor is elastic and giving, so it can stretch and contract. And of course, if you're working with a half halt and you're constantly squeezing your pelvic floor, then you're telling the horse to slow or stop or break in some way. So we really want to be training the muscles off of the horse so that when you get on, they're just ready. And you shouldn't really need to be gripping or squeezing, and definitely not pulling up the pelvic floor. If you've got to pull anything in, you know, think about narrowing your waist or your rib cage, but try and just tone those muscles so that they are reactive when they're needed and not gripped. So really good question, the pelvic floor and riding. I could go on for another hour about that.
Thank you. We've got a question from Lynn. Lynn says, I've had a second left hip replacement, which is amazing, but I need some exercises to help my right hip. Actually, I would need these too. So
yeah, okay, a good one for that is, excuse me, getting this. I've got a little pile of head blocks here, and this is good if you're at the stable or yard. You can step up onto you know, a pile of bricks or something. Have one leg on whatever your base is. Please hold on to something, because this is about releasing the hip. You don't need to challenge your balance. So you're holding on to something and you're going to let the leg dangle. Keep it straight, because if you're bending the knee, then you're only moving the knee. Your leg is straight. You want to feel, you see the stripe on my trousers, that your leg is moving in the hip socket. And if the leg is dangling, it's only going to move where it's comfortable, not enough to swing the body. And then maybe do a few little circles, one way and then the other. You need to be lifted so that the leg that's dangling can hang. And if that feels comfortable and you're doing it with a riding boot, it's going to hang it even more because of the weight. And then you need to go to classic type Pilates movements, knee thigh opening, taking the leg back in, and various different sort of strengthening exercises. But when you're talking about, you know, a hip that's grumbly or any joint that's grumbly, it's low intensity, gentle movements with control, focus on control. So really great one is, I'll show you that way. Keep the pelvis still. My pelvis is a piece of concrete, so I'm not squeezing the pelvic floor, I'm just keeping the pelvis still. And I'm going to take my thigh out without moving the other leg and the pelvis and bring it back in. This is a classic Pilates hip movement, hip toning, core toning exercise. And it's low intensity, which means it's not really overwhelming the joints, but it's working them at a level that they can control. So that's the kind of thing you could work on, and then maybe add a Dynaband or something like that if you feel it's controlled. But it's great to do that work because you need to balance up between the hips that are now going to be very different, because one's grumbly and one's happy. So, you know, there you go, you've got asymmetries, but well done you for thinking about what you can do to help work on that.
Fabulous. And then we've got a question from Vicky. I have muscular pain in my lower right back. So this one's going to help me as well. So Heidi's had one to help, so this one helps me. So muscular pain in my lower right back, and I sit to the left on every horse I ride. Any ideas for exercises to help?
Yeah, so obviously I can't, you know, caveat, don't know what's going on, don't know your body, don't know blah, blah, blah. But often when it's lower back on one side, it's a muscle called the QL, the quadratus lumborum. And this is often because you're tight in the front of the hip. So tightness in one area, and remember I was saying if we're tight here, it's going to affect there. If we're tight here or tight here, it's going to hurt something. So if you're tight in the hip, it can make the back of your body, either on the same or even the opposite side, because sometimes we go in diagonals, feel quite tight. So it's about releasing the hips, I'm afraid, rather than really pummeling away at your back. So there are lots of exercises that you can do to release your back. One that I call cat camel.
Cat camel.
Cat camel. Cat arching, camel humping. So your back's moving. You could also move your QL by bringing the hip towards the same armpit. Can you see I'm bending my spine?
Yeah.
And then you do the same on the other side. So I don't know if you can sit better like that. Hip to the armpit, and then do the same on the other side. And that's going to create a little stretch in the muscle in the back of your pelvis. Other things that, you know, you often see people pulling the knees onto the chest. Well, you know, they're not the best stretches, to be honest, because they're very short term. It's like eating a bit of sweet, you know, sweet stuff. It's kind of gives you an instant hit, but it doesn't really help you long term. And other things that you could do, like rolling up and rolling back down, great movements, but sometimes you need to not look at where you're absolutely in pain, but other areas around. Release the hips. Those hip flexor stretches that I just showed you, the knee thigh opening, leg circles. So bring one of your legs up onto your chest and circle it, that kind of thing. Google hip releases, and that will often help the QL.
Perfect, thank you. Emma, who asked about the classes, is in West Sussex. So we yeah, no, I don't know. I have to say I'm not. I know quite a lot of people up in Surrey, but that's not far enough over, is it? No. Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Claire. That's been amazing. We learnt loads as always. It's been it's been fun.
Do you feel fitter though?
Of course. Yeah. I feel fitter.
Or should we say, which is way more important, have you got better awareness?
Definitely better awareness.
That's where we want to be.
Yeah. And it's really great to apply it to, you know, to the saddle and how you might sit in the saddle. So that's just been really, really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thoroughly enjoyed that. I'm just going to quickly share a screen over here just to chat about what's coming up in the next few weeks before we say goodbye. So next week we've got a week off, haven't we? And then we've got Jason Webb coming in to talk about settling your horse out and about. So that's sort of settling your horse if you go to a competition, or if you go to a fun ride, or if you just go to a different arena to go schooling, or whatever it might be, trying to help you get over any angst or any difficult behaviour that you have. So that should be brilliantly insightful. We've got Ali Wakelin on the 3rd of March. So Ali did a lot of training with Mary Wanless and also training with Andrew McLean. So she kind of brings the two things together, and she's going to be talking about starting and developing groundwork so that your horse has got super manners. And then we've got Simon Kokoza coming back on the 10th of March to help us, and basically it's a full Q&A session to answer questions related to core conditioning and kissing spine. So Simon's done 2 webinars with us already, and he had so many questions, we thought actually let's just get him back just to answer people's individual questions, see how we get on there. So that's the next few weeks. Claire, this is your contact details, so how people should get in touch with you.
Lovely.
So yeah, if you want to get in touch with Claire, she's on Facebook, Saddleworks Pilates for Riders, and email cmpilates@live.co.uk. Is that right?
Yeah, that's me.
Excellent.
I'd love to hear from you. I've got some online stuff, that's obviously always ongoing. And if you've got any other questions, just wang them onto the email. I'm happy to answer questions.
Fantastic, that's brilliant. And one other really exciting thing that's going on at the moment, and it's been filling mine and Thea's lives,
is Horsefest.
Yay!
Woo, 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 woo. Claire's coming to Horsefest. So if you want a live and interactive session with Claire to find out how really wonky you are and help getting unwonked, then yeah, come along. So do check it out on the website. We won't keep you much longer tonight, but there's a special prices for gold members running right now, extra special prices, and then extra special prices for free members will be started from Saturday at noon, and that is in Cheshire, 8th to the 10th of July. So bringing all of our experts and elite riders together. So check that out on our website, and we hope to see lots of you there.
Fantastic. Thanks everybody. Thank you, Claire. That's been brilliant. Really enjoyed it.
Take care. Bye everybody.
Bye.
Bye guys.
Bye.